Hello and welcome to a live Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. Thank you for being here. A little late today. We're starting at 2 o'clock Central instead of 1 o'clock to accommodate some of the work that's going on here at the house. And I appreciate you guys being patient with me. Those of you who were able to make it, thanks for being here. Happy Friday. We just had a huge torrential rain. I was going to get more wasp spray because we have lots of wasp nests and the guys working on the outside of the house. Anyway, out of nowhere, this is what happens in Texas. It's hot, it's dry, and then out of nowhere, buckets of rain. So that just happened. It got soaking wet. But I love it. I love the Texas rain. So I hope you're having a great Friday, getting ready for a great weekend. I'm going to be seeing my friend Mike Harlow this weekend and some other friends. And I'm pretty excited about that. So Mike Harlow, by the way, interviewing Sherry Curry tonight on his channel, which I'm so excited about. That's going to be a great interview. A couple of announcements. Let's see. Book club. So this coming week, July 18th at 6 o'clock, which is a Thursday, we are going to be discussing the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. You still have time to read it and join us. If you want to be a part of that video discussion, just email me at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com. I've already sent some of you guys the links. I know there's some others waiting on the link. I'm going to get it to you this week. I'm very excited. I think we have a larger group of people this time, and this book is great. So autobiography of Benjamin Franklin on Thursday, July 18th. Also, yesterday, if you missed it, not yesterday, Wednesday, if you missed it, I put out the full interview with Drew Outstanding, who is the Army veteran who was suffered a vaccine injury. I put out the full interview on Rumble. It got cut off here on YouTube at a certain point when he started talking about bears. And so the whole thing's up on Rumble if you want to go check it out there on Deprogrammed. Because I had a presentation to do at my church's youth retreat on Wednesday. We did not do a Christian panel, so we're doing it this coming week. The Christian panel is going to be on Wednesday the 17th at 6 o'clock Central. And we're going to be talking about the movie that's in theaters right now called Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot, I think is what it's called. It's another Angel Studios movie. If you get a chance, go and see it. If you don't want to be spoiled, because we're going to be talking about the film. I've heard it's good. I still have to watch it before Wednesday. So Sound of Hope, that's on Wednesday here on Deprogrammed. Also, let me show you this. First of all, thank you guys. Any of you guys who voted for my husband, he's in some kind of online music contest thing, and he made it through the first round, and he was first place in his group. This is a Rolling Stone thing. And so thank all of you guys who voted. The link is on the community tab on YouTube if you want to grab it, and I posted it on Facebook and some other places. So it's fun. Why not try? We're just seeing what happens. And we went from not caring about it all to now I'm like super competitive. I'm like watching it, see where he's at. And if you don't vote for him, we are going to lose our democracy. That's just, that's the pitch I want to make. That seems to work for presidential races. So I figured I would say it for this too. If you don't vote for Anthony Garcia, we're going to lose. We're losing the whole democracy. So here, let me show you something he just put out before we get started, because I'm so happy for him. So he got to interview, this is his friend, Jerry Boynton. And Jerry was best friends with the Big Bopper from Texas, and they worked at the radio station together, and he has all these great stories about the Big Bopper. And so Anthony's been working on editing this interview for a while. Oh, can you see it? Yeah, it's on the screen. And just in between gigs and renovation and everything, it took him a little bit to get this done, but he just put it up today. And if you like the Big Bopper, who doesn't like the Big Bopper? Chantilly lace and a pretty face. So the interview's up on his channel on Anthony Garcia Music. I'm just going to play this little clip right here.
Over the years, I've shared this story about JP and me and some of the some of the things that he did that were, in my estimation, no one in the world has done anything anywhere near what he did. There also are very, very few old songs, like recorded in 1958. If you ask people, even today, and I do this often, I say, do you know the name J.P. Richardson? No. Do you know the name the Big Bopper? Yeah, I remember that. Do you remember the song Chantilly Lace?
Hello, baby. Yeah, this is the Big Bopper speaking.
Who doesn't know it?
50% of the time, people start singing Chantilly Lace to me as a response. It just seems that it is embedded in the minds of people. It's such a unique presentation of music done by a guy who, if you had asked him, would he ever have anything that was the top 50 seller in the country, as a younger man, he'd say, you're crazy. And yet, if I could see him today, I think he would be very pleased that people still hear his song Chantilly Lace from time to time.
I love the Big Bopper. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina where, we only had like 3 TV stations really that we could get at our house out in the country. And so most of the shows they would play were old shows. So I grew up with a lot of TV from the like I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show and stuff like that. So TV from previous generations, reruns of all of that. And then the music also was a lot of older music. And there was one burger joint in town that was a 1950s style burger joint, still there. And it had the owner had an old, like everything was styled inside to be like a 50s diner. And he had an old Studebaker, like an old car inside, and old radios. And they had one of the jukeboxes where you could put quarters in, and it was all 50s music. And that might be why I love 50s music so much today. But as a kid, it was like, I grew up listening to the Big Bopper, and I know all the words of that song. Of course, it's such a fun song. And this interview is Anthony did this with him a couple months ago, and he just, like I said, just finished editing it. So if you're interested in music history, if you're interested in music, go check it out. It's on his page on Anthony Garcia Music. Thank you, Pirate. Pirate put the link here to watch if you want to see it, and also the voting link for the contest that I'm really competitive about now. Chantilly based, says Adam Worrell. Chantilly based and a pretty face. And a ponytail hanging down. Okay, that's enough of the Big Bopper, but go watch it. Okay, I think that's all. I'm just looking at the announcements. I think that's all the announcements. So today's episode, I did pre-record. I pre-recorded something with Tracy from Keto and Crime about Project 2025, which is the memes about Project 2025 are hysterical. They're some of the funniest memes I've seen in a long time. And but I'm going to wait and talk about that later because we already did a video together. I think it's coming out on her channel today or tomorrow. And then I'm going to put that up on Deprogrammed as well and cover some more of that later. Today, I just wanted to get really specific. My friend Kenny Shu, you guys may remember him. I've interviewed him in the past about racist discrimination against Asian Americans at college campuses. So he was a big part of working to, get the Supreme Court to, on the case that made it to the Supreme Court, where they ultimately said, hey, this is against the law. You can't discriminate against college admissions on the basis of race. And if you haven't seen it, just look for the interview here on Deprogrammed with Kenny Shu. It's his last name is spelled XU. And so he sent me something today about my alma mater, Duke University. And it was really troublesome. And I'm so ashamed of them. I've been seeing such bad news out of Duke. And I really just wanted to do a video for them, for Duke University, calling them out in the title and explaining what's wrong with what they've been pushing. And we may as well start here. This is Kenny's tweet about it. He said, "I'm excited to debut Color Us United's next campaign to end DEI at Duke University Medical School, the seat of so much of what is wrong with healthcare today. Prejudice against white patients, diversity admissions. Duke must end these practices now." Color Us United is the org that he works with, and they've got a petition going about this with some more information about what's been happening. But here, let me just pull up one of the first things. Can you guys see this? Yeah. So first of all, there's lots of things they've done, but we're starting with this, the racist DEI stuff that they're doing right now at the medical university. So they had their employees sign one of these Marxist, communist loyalty oaths, basically one of these pledges. And it was this DEI racist pledge. And here's an article about it. Let's just read through some of this. This is from the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. And this is an article from May of last year of 2023, an article by Kendall Conger. Duke Health's anti-racist pledge is not guided by science. A Duke physician pushes back against the racism as a public health crisis narrative. Now, I want you to know, spoiler alert, they fired this doctor. They fired this doctor for asking questions, for asking them for evidence of the claims, that they wanted him to put his name on. So here we go. In May of 2021, the Duke Health System sent a draft pledge to the employee community, affirming that the organization, quote, stands against racism, bias, and hate. This pledge, since published on the Duke Health website, was signed by 4 medical doctors and 1 PhD and included the assurance that the drafters were, quote, guided by science. That's what they said. Sounds a little bit like Fauci, right? Guided by science. Give me a break. It's the exact opposite. Their fundamental reason for writing the pledge and its fundamental claim was that, quote, they said this, they made this claim, quote, racism is a public health crisis, end quote. That's a pretty hysterical, extraordinary claim to make for a medical school to make. For a university that, I don't know if they still call themselves this. It's been a while since I was there. But when I went to Duke, we were pretty arrogant. We called ourselves the Ivy League of the South. So stupid. People there pride themselves on, being very smart people. And this is what the very smart people are saying now, that racism is a public health crisis. Okay, well, you're a medical, this is the medical university. Why don't you tell us, like, where's the evidence for that? If it's a public health crisis, show us. But they put this in the pledge, that racism is a public health crisis. That had not been my experience, nor did it fit my observations, so I asked to see the clinical data the authors had used to form this conclusion. After much back and forth, I received the following reply from Duke Health Senior Administrator, quote, I concede that I cannot find a clinical trial that proves implicit bias is the cause of worse health outcomes for African Americans. Believe me, I have looked. Okay, so you can't find even one clinical trial that proves this thing that you're putting as a statement of fact, that you're assuring people is guided by science, but you can't point to even one piece of scientific research to support it. While the reply acknowledged that Duke could have worded the pledge better, the official with whom I corresponded nevertheless felt that, quote, social science data supported the pledge's assertion. My response was that Duke Health was a medical institution and was supposed to rely on evidence-based clinical medicine. Social science data are inherently political and a source of disagreement between political parties. Thus, Duke was presuming to make a political assertion on behalf of its employees, who were in no position to push back. They were acting politically under the guise of medical science. What does that remind They were acting politically under the guise of medical science. Takes me back to the past few COVID years when they were acting politically to push authoritarian policies on the public and saying they were doing it under the guise of science. Because the draft pledge had been accompanied by a letter soliciting, quote, concerns and contrary perspectives, I felt that my silence would represent tacit approval. As Duke was not moved to correct itself following my initial query, I proceeded to ask a second, more substantial question regarding the pledge's commitment to equitable healthcare. There it is, equitable healthcare. If you see that word equity or equitable, that's one of the cult words. My old cult, which I was in. This is why this story is personal to me in a way. I was indoctrinated into that cult, into the DEI, critical race theory, social justice, feminist theory, queer theory cult, all of that stuff, which now most often is called woke. I was indoctrinated into that belief system at Duke in the late 90s, back when it was just in the social sciences. Now it's in the medical university. Now it's in the medical field. So they have a commitment to equitable healthcare. Cult words. Was Duke, quote, promoting equal outcomes for groups or the equal treatment of individuals? Equal outcomes for groups. That's equity. That's not equality. Equity is not equality. It's equal outcomes. And they will do unequal things. They will treat you unequally so they can try and create equal outcomes. They will discriminate against you so they can try to create equal outcomes among groups. They will engage in racist and sexist discrimination against you, against individuals, so they can try and create equal outcomes among groups. They don't see you as an individual. This ideology doesn't see anybody as an individual. It sees you as a identity group member. It's a lot like white supremacy in that way. He continues, in my new letter, I explain that society works best when we try to treat each individual, yes, as having equal worth, dignity, and protection under the law. A collectivist system, on the other hand, is concerned with the worth, dignity, and protection of groups. Yes, these two systems are mutually exclusive. The pledge states, quote, we must ensure equitable access to treatments and care, and asserts that, quote, excellent healthcare cannot happen without equity. Really? Without discrimination? Yet the underlying assumption in those claims is that equitable access and equity are revealed by equal outcomes. As the left-leaning Aspen Institute has written, quote, racial equity is what a genuinely non-racist society would look like. This is in contrast to the current state of affairs in which a person of color is more likely to experience poor health outcomes. So that's their definition of racial equity. Now contrast that with the Declaration of Independence, which affirms that people are endowed by their creator with equal rights as individuals, not a guarantee of equal outcomes for groups. The latter is a collectivist mindset. These are two very different visions for society: equal rights and opportunity on the one hand, and equal outcomes on the other. This essay is just perfectly worded. He does such a great job of explaining this. When he says they're mutually exclusive, he's telling the truth. You can't have like individualism is the exact opposite of collectivism. You can't have both. If you're a collectivist, you're not an individualist. You don't treat people as individuals. You don't judge and treat them differently on the basis of their character. You judge and treat them differently on the basis of their race and their sex or their sexuality or whatever identity groups they're in, just like white supremacists do, just like the people you think you're fighting. The former, he says, equal rights and opportunity. The former is free and based on individual merit, while the latter, equal outcomes, is forced and based on group performance. Both systems have been tried, with the results unequivocally favoring individual freedom over group equality. Individuals were created in the image of God. Groups were not. Individuals are equal. Groups are not. Duke gave me no answer to my follow-up query. Its website reads, quote, "We encourage questions and challenges. Therefore, I repeated my question. Why is Duke pursuing a social and political structure based on the equality of outcomes for groups, collectivism, rather than promoting an organization based on the equal treatment of each person, individualism?" After 2 months without a response, I wrote a third time with the same question and stated, "If Duke remains silent, I will assume Duke has declined to address this matter privately and that I may make my concern public." Equality of individuals or equality of groups. It cannot be both. My concern was and remains that a real public health crisis will result from favoring a race-based ideology over evidence-based care. This is such an important statement. They always, these Marxists, whether they're old school Marxists, where they view the world as a struggle for wealth among class groups, or they're these new kind of Marxists, the identity Marxists that I was, where they view the world as a struggle for power between identity groups. It doesn't matter. They always create the thing they say they're fighting. And so he says, my concern is that a real public health crisis will result from favoring a race-based ideology over evidence-based. He continues, "We cannot govern for the equal treatment of individuals, which will lead to unequal prosperity, and simultaneously for equal outcomes for groups, which will lead to equal poverty." Nevertheless, Duke seems committed to influencing group outcomes rather than individual ones. Most recently, I directed my inquiries to human resources and received no response. The decision to ignore a legitimate concern is one I cannot understand. Duke must not persist in making politicized, unscientific assertions on behalf of its employees. And so at the time, here it has his bio, Kendall Conger, MD, is a practicing emergency medicine physician and an adjunct associate in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health at the Duke University School of Medicine. Okay, so let's see what happened. Let's see what happened to him. Spoiler. How did they like this? Him going public, since they would not answer him privately. Duke Health fires conservative doctor. They fired him. This is so gross. This is just so gross. So this article was from this month, July 1st, 2024. Duke Health fires conservative doctor. Asked to produce evidence for its racism claims, the university hospital lashed out instead. And this article is by Mike Markham. Duke University Health System has terminated Dr. Kendall Conger, an emergency room physician in its Raleigh, North Carolina hospital. Conger had made waves in recent years for questioning, including in this Martin Center article, Duke's 2021 pledge against racism in medicine. A respected member of the medical community, Conger took no issue with standing against racism or treating people with decency and respect, primary tenets of the pledge. However, he did question whether racism in medicine was as significant a problem as Duke believed it to be, and whether there was legitimate scientific evidence to support that belief. In 2020, for example, Duke Health had gone so far as to declare that racism was, quote, a public health crisis, end quote. And again, that was in that statement where they said they were guided by science. After years of being ignored and receiving information from Duke that was long on ideology and short on science and clinical data, Conger apparently pushed his employer over the edge. In December of 2023, Conger's supervisor told him that the reason the institution was typically reluctant to engage him on its stances was his tendency to discuss those matters outside of the workplace. Conger was understandably puzzled that a prominent institution would take issue with members of the public hearing how it had defended things that it strongly believed in. This is such a secretive thing. This is such a communist tactic, right? we're not going to talk about it with you because we don't want transparency. Transparency is necessary for science. It's necessary. Science requires reproducible results and transparent methods. It doesn't require belief or faith or trust the science. We should trust data. We should trust reproducible results. That's what science requires, and transparent methodology. It's not supposed to be a faith system, a religion, like Fauci tried to make it, for example. Conger immediately sent a letter to several of his colleagues informing them of the message he had received from his supervisor. Duke Health notified him of his termination a few weeks later. His employment terms with Duke did not require that any reason be given for his termination. However, Duke did state in a letter to Conger, quote, "We believe your behavior is negatively impacting the emergency physician team, which could jeopardize the care of patients." Again, like sociopaths. Marxists accuse you of the very thing they're doing. They are jeopardizing the care of patients by prioritizing equity, which is equal outcomes for groups, over individual care. They also said, given this, we are choosing not to renew your contract for employment, end quote. While failing to offer any specifics, Duke Health appeared to suggest that Conger's commitment to treating patients as individuals and rejecting the dynamics of collectivism could potentially put patients in harm's way, as could his observation of the lack of scientific evidence for Duke's ominous claims about racism in medicine. As Conger wrote for the Martin Center last year, Duke's 2021 anti-racist pledge said that the institution is, quote, guided by science. Yet no one at Duke was ever able to prove to Conger that its pledge was anything other than a well-meaning yet unnecessary response to a popular political movement. Duke employees were briefed on the pledge before it was released publicly and were invited to contact their superiors with any questions or concerns. Conger's trouble began when he decided to take his employer up on that offer. After being ignored by an outgoing high-ranking hospital administrator, Conger reached out to the Duke Raleigh Hospital president, Dr. Barbara Griffith, several times, including at an initial in-person meeting. Conger, who wanted to be certain that he wasn't personally being roped into a political position held by his employer, was never offered any scientific or clinical justification for the idea that racism is a significant issue in medicine, a public health crisis. This concerned Conger, who desired to perform his job free from the shadow of politics or well-meaning yet false social narratives. He specifically questioned Duke brass as to why they believed it was beneficial to view patients as members of ethnic groups more than as individuals requiring care. Furthermore, as a respected physician, he was particularly concerned about any ideas being presented as absolutes without accompanying clinical data or scientific proof. A Duke-employed doctor for 12 years, Conger had everyday professional experiences in the intense field of emergency medicine that were at odds with Duke's claim about racism. Duke's anti-racist pledge states, quote, "We recognize our own implicit bias." What does that sound like? What does this cult stuff sound like? What does that sound like? I mean, to me, it sounds like Maoist China. It sounds like struggle sessions, which is what it is. False confessions, cult indoctrination. It's not, woke is not just a religion. It's a cult. It's a cult religion. Wow, what an oath, right? Hey, you want to practice medicine at Duke University? You know, put your hand over your heart and confess your sin of implicit bias. That's so gross. Duke, I used to be proud of going to Duke University. Now it's a joke. You guys are a joke. It's appalling. I'll continue. Ironically, by definition, one cannot recognize his or her own implicit biases as that phrase is traditionally defined. Prior to his notice of termination, Conger did at one point receive an email from a Duke official who said, quote, "I concede that I cannot find a clinical trial that proves implicit bias is the cause of worse health outcomes for African Americans. Believe me, I've looked." So this mystical, magical thing, what is it they say about people who believe in God? Sky daddy. Implicit bias is your sky daddy. You worship at the altar of implicit bias, but you can't offer. This is a hospital. You guys are medical doctors, and you want to force the other doctors there to worship at the altar, to confess their sin of implicit bias, and you have no clinical data to explain what it is, to prove that it exists, to prove that it's the cause of worse health outcomes for Black people. Conger was astounded that Duke had appeared to search for supporting data after it had created the publicly released its pledge. Yeah, they didn't even look for it before. Of course they don't. It's a cult. The Duke administrator who corresponded with Conger did mention, quote, ample causal inference data in the social sciences. Yet Conger believed that a medical institution should rely on evidence-based clinical data, not causal inference. Social science data are known to be easily manipulable and generally viewed as inappropriate and insufficient for forming conclusions or driving actions in the field of medicine. Conger also recalls being shown an illustration during a Duke-sponsored function that depicted white males as agents of oppression and exploitation, while ominously labeling members of other demographics as targets. This is all identity Marxism. This is the stuff I was brainwashed with when I was at Duke as part of my women's studies minor. So oppression and exploitation directly lifted from Marxism. They just change it. Instead of it being the bourgeoisie, it's, the oppressor is it's identity groups. It's not class groups. It's identity groups. So the oppressor is white people, men, straight people, average weight people, people who don't have mental health issues. This new category they just made up, cis people who are not trans. They made it about identity rather than about class. And do you know how I know this? Because I took these classes at Duke. Because I was in women's studies classes, I was in critical race theory classes, I was in queer theory classes, where all of the theorists we were reading were referencing Marx. They were all Marxists. It all came from that. They were all building on Marxism, mutating it, changing it, applying it to identity and power rather than to wealth and class, or class and wealth. And now it's in the Duke University hospitals, putting it in a pledge, an oath for their employees to take. Again, no scientific or clinical data was offered to justify or explain why a major healthcare provider espoused such darkly generalized views of individuals. Look, this is the illustration at the Duke event he was at. And you have a white guy up there. He's an agent. He's an agent of oppression. And these are all the different words that they use. They use these interchangeably with oppression. They use marginal, privileged or marginalized instead of oppressed or oppressed. But you can see all these words that they use interchangeably with oppress: discriminate, oppress, marginalize, exploit, disenfranchise. And down below, you have members of oppressed groups, marginalized groups, like women and Black people. And then it says below, an agent of oppression are members of dominant social groups, privileged by birth or acquisition, who knowingly or unknowingly exploit and reap unfair advantage over members of the target groups. Duke, this is not science. This is a religion. This is a cult religion. While Conger is left to plan his next professional move, Duke Health, an arm of a Tier 1 research university and so-called Southern Ivy. There it is. Southern Ivy League. That's what we call ourselves. So-called Southern Ivy has yet to explain its ominous claim that racism is, quote, a public health crisis. So they fired him. This article's from this month. I'm going to take this down for a second, and then I'm going to show you what Kenny Shu's organization is doing about it, or what they're trying to do about it. So this is the organization Color Us United. And they have a new petition here. I signed it. You don't have to be a Duke alum to sign it. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Hopefully it shows up. And these guys do great work. So actually, a lot of organizations are all talk. This one is not one that's all talk. So, by the way, they have a DEI tip line up here. You can let them know about stuff like this at the university you went to, or your company, or you can let them know about it up there. So this is their petition: stand against Duke's unscientific, unethical racial agenda. And so they summarize what's been going on there. Duke University Health System has deemed racism a, quote, public health crisis, despite having no legitimate clinical data with which to substantiate such a dark and disturbing claim. Duke Health is a major healthcare provider in America's 9th largest state and oversees a prestigious medical school that trains the next generation of doctors. Duke has boldly integrated its divisive political ideology into hiring and training. There are so many ways in which this is harmful and dangerous for patients. Because number one, you are hiring not based on merit, but you're hiring based on identity group status. Like if they're a woman, or if they're a person of color, or if they're gay, you're not hiring based on merit. And medicine is one of the most important fields where it's one of the most important when it comes to meritocracy, because they literally hold people's lives in their hands. I would put medicine up there with aviation. You want your surgeon and you want your airplane pilot to be the best at their job. You don't want them to have been chosen because of this backwards, racist, Marxist ideology. They are literally, I use that word sparingly only when it actually applies. They're literally potentially harming people, putting people's lives in danger by using DEI to hire and fire. It's in their hiring and their training. And so this petition continues, this which may potentially be compromising patient care. Duke has offered no scientific explanation as to why their focus on race is medically beneficial or ethical. And they even fired a doctor who questioned the legitimacy of Duke Health's views and actions. These are the facts. We have committed to providing you with the relevant sources. So if you want to share this with anyone, and I recommend you do, there are a ton of sources here. You can click on that link and see all of the source material, including some of the articles I was reading. There's a lot more. And so then here's the text of the petition. Your voice is essential to turn things around. We need to let Duke University and Duke Health know that those that it serves and influences take their health and communities seriously. Duke cannot continue with unethical, dangerous, and potentially illegal practices in hiring and training. As a major educator and healthcare provider, the quality of training and care that North Carolina residents and others receive from Duke is critically important and cannot be based on anything other than science and merit. You know, this is also personal to me. I have a family member with cancer who has received part of their treatment at Duke. Supposed to be one of the best hospitals in the country, right? It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. Okay. I'll continue with the petition. As a major educator and healthcare provider, the quality of training and care that North Carolina residents and others receive from Duke is critically important, cannot be based on anything other than science and merit. Judging applicants, employees, or patients according to things like skin color is shockingly inappropriate and completely unacceptable. The primary function of any doctor or employer of doctors is to take care of patients, not promote political activism or racial ideology. With medical mistakes being the third leading cause of death in the US, can you really afford to leave your health in the hands of a potentially inferior healthcare professional or brazenly biased doctors? North Carolinians deserve the best care available according to the highest possible standards. Duke University, the Duke University School of Medicine, and Duke University healthcare system have been infiltrated by dangerous non-medical and unscientific thinking. The boards of these institutions must be approached and challenged. By signing this petition and informing them of your opposition to these policies, you agree to have your voice represented to the board members of Duke as we challenge them to renounce their supposedly anti-racist pledge, which is a racist pledge, their biased hiring practices, and their unscientific, political, and racially charged rhetoric. And so here's the petition you can sign. I am deeply concerned and appalled at what I've learned about the misguided diversity initiatives at Duke Health and Duke University School of Medicine. The ideas and practices are unscientific, divisive, unethical, possibly illegal, and potentially dangerous to the citizens of North Carolina and to others who travel from out of state to come to your hospital for cancer treatment. Personally speaking, there is no place in medicine for unscientific and non-clinical racial and political ideologies that preference race in hiring. The only thing that matters in healthcare is finding the best professionals available based on merit, regardless of skin color or gender. The claim that, quote, racism is a public health crisis is unscientific. It's as unscientific as it is unsettling. Duke's emphasis on skin color is completely inappropriate and dangerous. Duke's stated goals of increasing staff diversity are completely misguided. This is not because diversity is a negative or undesirable thing, but because diversity is not what creates better healthcare outcomes. The only thing that matters in medicine is having the very best professionals, regardless of skin color or gender. I respectfully yet unapologetically ask that you remove the unscientific and divisive race-based ideologies, training, rhetoric, and hiring practices from your institution and its affiliates. Unproven and unscientific concepts like implicit bias, dubious claims of racism being a public health crisis, and race-based hiring practices do not serve the best interests of Duke patients or the community at large. Duke Health's so-called anti-racism pledge, while presumably well-meaning, contains political rhetoric and fallacies that have no scientific basis or value in medicine. The pledge must be renounced, along with Duke's other inappropriate practices and ideologies. What North Carolinians deserve is to be treated by the best healthcare professionals available using the best possible practices and technologies available. We, the undersigned, stand against Duke Health's dangerous and unethical practice of pushing divisive and dangerous racial ideology into medical care and hiring, and their vilification of North Carolinians based on race. Join us in speaking out against DEI, and sign the petition. All names are confidential. And so I encourage you to sign this. Like I said, you don't have to be a Duke alum. If you are, there's a little thing you can check off to let them know that you are, because I think that would be nice to get a number of us who went there, shaming them, righteously shaming them for this, for pushing identity Marxism instead of science. I put the link. I'm going to edit the description and put it in. You can grab it below if you're watching this later. And I'm also dropping it in the chat right now again. ADL, thank you for the super chat, dude, for $4.99. Says, can you share the URL for the first 2 articles? Yes. And also you can, I'll put them in the chat, and I'll also put them in the description when I close. You can also grab them on the sources page at the petition link. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty upsetting. Sorry. So where's the racism, says Kendra? There is none. Yeah, the only racism it seems to be that you can actually point to and say, here it is, here's the example, is the racism in their hiring practices and in what they're teaching their medical students. That white people are oppressors, that's racist. There's the racism. This isn't the first time. I mean, Duke has been embarrassing and woke for a while now. And again, I was brought into the social justice and woke cult at Duke. I was there from 96 to 2000. And back then it was not in, my major was biological anthropology and anatomy, and it was not in the hard sciences yet. I wasn't getting a dose of it in my science classes, but my minor was women's studies. And I was getting a heavy dose of it, of course, in the social sciences. I was getting a heavy dose of it in women's studies, which is now they don't call it women's studies. That's problematic. It's gender studies now. But I was getting in women's studies, critical race theory, queer theory classes. It was rampant. And now it's everywhere at Duke. Here's another article. Someone shared this with me in the comments. It's from this month also. Look at this. They're pushing this old racist trope again. Remember this? Remember when the Smithsonian Museum got in trouble for pushing this? This really racist idea. This is racist towards, that's the thing about woke and social justice. It's racist towards everyone. It's racist towards white people, yes, but it's also racist towards the so-called marginalized groups that it claims to be fighting for. It's racist towards Black people and Latino people and Asian people. It's just a thoroughly racist belief system. And so one of the racist ideas they push is that Black people are just inherently different from white people, and they can't show up on time. They don't know how to be on time anywhere. They push this. You know who else says stuff like that? White supremacists. Isn't that shocking? They push the idea that the nuclear family is a white people thing. That's racist towards everyone. It's so insulting towards people of color. So look at this article. This is from July 9th, 2024, from this month. New York Post headline, expecting white people to be on time. Or, sorry, not white people. Expecting people to be on time is part of, quote, white supremacy culture, Duke Medical School claims. This is just incredible. Duke Medical School claims it is white supremacy culture to expect people of color to be on time in a strategic plan for creating, quote, an anti-racist workforce. Anytime you see anti-racist, again, that's one of these cult phrases, one of these woke social justice phrases, and it means the opposite. It's a lot like Orwellian speak. It's a lot like 1984, the book 1984, where they name everything the opposite of what it is. Like the Ministry of Truth is actually about pushing propaganda. So when you see anti-racist, it means racist. They're putting in place a plan for a racist workforce. The medical school said its goal is to catalyze, this is a quote, catalyze anti-racist practice through education. In a 2021 plan titled, quote, dismantling racism and advancing equity, there's the cult word, diversity and inclusion in the School of Medicine, end quote. It's so funny they're still using this phrase. That one's kind of old, dismantling racism. That was one of the first cult, like woke cult programmings I went to. It was dismantling racism training. And I was there as a representative from Duke University. It was an Amnesty International conference and training, and it was a struggle session where I learned the woke redefinitions, because they redefine words like all cults do. They redefine racism, they redefine sexism. I learned the new definitions. It's a brainwashing. Dismantling racism. The guide, praised by the school's dean, do not give this school any money. If you went to Duke, do not give them any money. If you've been giving them money, write them a letter and tell them why you're not doing it anymore. The school's dean praised this and said, he said it called out what is deemed, quote, white supremacy culture with its purported nitpicking about being on time, dress code, speech, and work style. It also contains a series of negative terminology vis-a-vis white culture. Quote, white supremacy culture is the idea or ideology that white people and the ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to people of color and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions, the document stated. This is what's racist about this. A couple things. They act like white people and people who are not white are so incredibly different. One's from Mars and one's from Venus. We're not all humans. We're just so different. We have different values, actions, thoughts, and beliefs. We're like an alien species. How could we ever relate? They also act like your race dictates what your values, thoughts, and beliefs are and your actions are. And that you all, every white person is all the same ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions and values, and that all black people they all share the same thoughts, beliefs, actions. That's ridiculous. This is not science. Again, this is racism. This is actually white supremacy. They just call it woke. They just call it dismantling racism. The document stated that America is rigged for the interests of white people who get privileges. There it is. Sins. That's your sin. You're born with it. Your implicit bias, your privilege. In this faith, in this religious cult. Who get privileges, i.e., the quote, unquestioned and unearned set of advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices bestowed on people solely because they're white. End quote. They don't prove this. There's no science behind this yet again. You know what we can prove, and we did prove, is you get an unearned set of advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices based on the fact that you're not white. And if you're applying to college or you're trying to be hired, that's a thing that actually happens. You get unearned advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices. That's what the Supreme Court decision was about, where the Supreme Court finally said this is wrong. You can't penalize Asian students who are applying to your college because they're Asian. You can't penalize them for being Asian. You can't penalize people for being white. You can't discriminate against them on the basis of their race. You can't end racism with racism. It makes no sense. Oh, I'm against racism, so I'm going to be a racist for a while until we get rid of it. What? If we can't beat them, join them. It continues, quote, CRT, critical race theory scholars note that the social construction of race and racism is a regular component of American society. It is embedded in structures such as law, culture, and economics, which supports the interests of white people, end quote. Again, this is not science. This is a religion. They're basically saying our cult priests and priestesses, they say. It went on to claim that white supremacy culture is, quote, power hoarding to the disadvantage of non-whites. Look at that word power. What did I say at the beginning? This ideology, this belief system that I was in, it's built around power. It's like mutated Marxism. So the Marxism that most are familiar with was about class and wealth. So and the means of production and property. So it was saying that, you know, like a Marxism for dummies would be that it was about saying that, you know, people are unequal based on wealth and the advantages that come with wealth and class status. And so we have to treat people differently. We have to seize the means of production from people who have it and give it to people who don't. We have to seize wealth and give it to people who don't. We have to balance things according to wealth and property. And then we'll all be equal. This says, no, it's about power. It's about power and which groups have power, which identity groups have power. So it's about power and identity. And they say some groups have power and other groups don't. And we have to take power, we have to seize power and give it to the identity groups that don't have it. Well, how do you do that? You have to discriminate against people if they happen to be in one of these racial groups or if they're in the gender that we say is oppressed. You have to treat them differently. You have to discriminate against them. They say this openly. Ibram X. Kendi, he says racist discrimination is necessary in order to eliminate racism. That's what he believed. That's what they say. It's about power for them. That's what's at the center of this cult religion, power. It's what they worship. It's why when they die, they say rest in power about woke people, about social justice people. It's something I used to say when I was in it. They don't say rest in peace. They say rest in power. Well, if you think about that, why would you say that? It's what you value, not peace. In the workplace, white supremacy culture explicitly and implicitly privileges whiteness. This is what Duke put out, the Duke Medical Center. In the workplace, white supremacy culture explicitly and implicitly privileges whiteness and discriminates against non-Western and non-white professionalism standards related to dress code, speech, work style, and timeliness, the document said. Some identifiable characteristics of this culture, they're talking about supposed white culture, includes perfectionism and a belief that there's only one right way, power hoarding, individualism. They call out individualism specifically. They're telling you they are collectivists, just like white supremacists. They are collectivists. They are not individualists. They don't believe, they're not like Martin Luther King. They don't believe in treating people on the basis of their character, behavior, beliefs, actions. They don't believe in treating people as individuals, like on a case-by-case basis. How do you behave? How do you perform? What do you do? They believe in treating people differently on based on what collectives they're in. Their racial collective, their sex collective, like the gender collective. Are you a man or a woman? You know, I'm going to treat you differently depending. Are you white or black or Asian or Mexican? I'm going to treat you differently depending. That's how they operate, just like white supremacists. And they say it. They identify individualism as a bad thing. Sense of urgency, I guess they say, well, that's a white thing, and defensiveness. The dean, Dr. Mary Klotman, praised the guide for reflecting the medical school's, quote, the dean's a woman. Sorry. I thought it was a man. Oh, well, I'm tempted to make a little joke here about her being of course, that makes sense. Anyway, the dean, Dr. Mary Klotman, praised the guide for reflecting the medical school's, quote, goals, priorities, and strategies. Here's the reason I was going to make the joke. If there's new people visiting, and I hope there are, who don't understand woke, maybe you're in woke and you don't understand, or you don't understand why people are against it. The reason I was going to make that joke is because it's predominantly women. Like, if you look at the demographics, it's especially white women who push this ideology that I used to be in. For some reason, women tend to be more susceptible to it. I think because it preys upon your empathy, and I think for a lot of women, it plugs into their desire to their biological, like, maternal instinct. And if they don't, especially if they don't have kids, it's like you need to defend and be a mama bear for these so-called oppressed groups. And it perverts that. And it uses that to turn these women, to turn me, I was in it for 2 decades, to turn us into foot soldiers for identity Marxism, for really messed up, racist, sexist ideology. So that's why I was going to make that joke. But yeah, it's a woman. She praised it. She praised this guide. And she says, quote, "Our plan for dismantling racism and advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion was created with an intentional and appropriate need for flexibility," she said. "As you read this plan, consider the actions you might take individually with your teams and in your local units to support our collective goals." Oh, there's a lot of buzzwords in that one, huh? Collective goals. Actions. They're all about turning people into activists. "Each of you will play an important role in advancing our mission to dismantle racism and promote equity." Equity, there's the cult word. Equal outcomes among groups. "Promote equity, not equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion at Duke and beyond." The school outlined a plan to create, quote, "an anti-racist workforce," which means it's a plan to create a racist workforce. Part of that mission included establishing pipelines for recruitment at historically Black colleges and universities and community colleges. Another part of the document claimed that white people have fragility. This is a new part of woke. They all build upon one another, you know. If you trace it all down to the bottom, you get Marx, but they all build on one another. Robin DiAngelo is the one who coined the term white fragility. And she was building upon the work of all these other Marxist critical theorists, feminist theorists, queer theorists, racial theorists. And one of those was Peggy McIntosh in the 80s, who coined the phrase white privilege. I learned about Peggy when I was at Duke. I learned about my white privilege. I confessed my white privilege. So now they're referencing Robin DiAngelo, who the term white fragility was coined by Robin DiAngelo in her 2018 book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. That book, by the way, is stunning. You should read it at least once. Don't buy it. I wouldn't give it any money, but find yourself a copy. I've seen some copies online. There are so many crazy things in that book, and some things that Robin DiAngelo reveals about herself. One of which is that I think the reason she had a lot of it makes sense. The reason she thinks all white people are racist is because she's racist. And so it's this projection, like every white person is like me. And she talks about going to a picnic. It was like a company picnic or something, and she got there and she saw a table of mostly Black women, and then she thought, and there like a table of white women that was full, and she internally was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna have to sit with the Black women." You know, she's a racist. That's crazy. And she then assumed, "Oh, that's what all white people are like. They're all like me. They're all racist like me." Peggy McIntosh too, the one who coined in the 80s white privilege. I mean, she was very privileged. Her family was in the top 1% of the 1% in terms of wealth. And like Robin DiAngelo, I think she looked around and was like, all white people were like me. All this privilege I have, it's because of my race. DiAngelo argues that many white people have an have a limited understanding of racism as a systemic issue and often react defensively when their racial privilege or purported unconscious biases are highlighted. Can you imagine? Because see, in the woke religious cult that I was in, they borrow a lot. They borrow some things from Christianity and they change it. And one of the things they borrow is this privilege thing. It functions a lot like sin, except one way in which it's different is that they say you're born with varying degrees of it, based on your immutable characteristics. So your sin, the degree of your sin, is different based on your race and your sex and your sexuality and all these identity things. So that's different. You know, Christianity says we're all born with sin. We're all fallen from grace. And the world is, because the world is full of sin. And in this religion, it's like you're not equal. You're born with sin, but it depends on what how much you have of it depends on what your race and your sex and your sexuality are and your size and all these things. And just think about this for a second, because it's like she says, you know, basically in this cult religion I was in woke, you know, when we tell people about their sin, they get defensive. Or about their privilege, but they mean sin. Think about that for a second. Think of a Christian, imagine a Christian being like, you know, when I try to tell people that we're all fallen from grace and we're all sinful, like, I can't believe that they get defensive. Of course they do. Of course non-believers are gonna react. I used to react that way to that, hearing that. Of course they do, because they don't want to think they have any evil in their heart. It's all good, right? They're not capable of evil. They are. We all are. We all are capable of evil. But there's that initial knee-jerk reaction, and I just think that's funny because, just imagine a Christian saying, you know, "I just don't get it. It's like when I go out and tell people they're sinful, they just often react defensively." And that's what she's saying. She's like, "When I go out and tell white people they're privileged, they just get defensive about it." White fragility is described by the school, by Duke, as, quote, "feelings of discomfort a white person experiences when they witness or engage in discussions around racial inequality and injustice." The funny thing about white fragility, the concept that Robin DiAngelo came up with, is also that it's a Kafka trap. And a Kafka trap is where it's just a circle. It's like a circular argument. If they say you have white fragility, excuse me. If you say, "Yes, I do," then yay, you all agree that you have white fragility. Now, if you say, "No, I don't, there's no such thing," they say, "Aha, that's evidence of your white fragility." It just goes in a circle. You can't it's a Kafka trap. It cannot be disproven, right? That's they say. If you say you have it, you do. If you say you don't, that means you do. It's evidence that you do. It's kind of funny. Allies of the cause of anti-racism are individuals who, quote, "recognize their privilege," that's their sin, and their group sin, their collective sin based on their skin color, right? And they commit effort to work with so-called oppressed groups in the struggle for justice. It's a struggle for racism, for discrimination. The white person may be triggered to engage in, quote, "a range of defensive actions, feelings, and behaviors such as anger, fear, and silence when discussions about racism come up," the guide said. I want to give you another example of the Kafka trap. If you look on my channel on Deprogrammed, I did a series of we watched together the Race to Dinner cult programming, and this is put on by Sarah Rao, and I think her name is Regina Jackson, and there's these two grifters, these social justice woke grifters, who charge white women thousands of dollars, thousands, to come and sit at a dinner where they get told that they're bigoted and they have implicit bias and they're unconsciously racist and they have racial privilege. And no matter what the women say, no matter how they react, even when they're being insulted and talked down to, It's wrong. Every reaction is wrong. If they cry, they get mocked and they're told it's white tears. It's a racist phrase. It's a really racist phrase. But they say, oh, that's your white tears. Because white tears are different, right? Our blood's different. Our tears are different. We don't have melanin, so we're evil. That's what some of the BLM people say. That BLM leader in Canada used to say that anyway. Quote, at the Duke University School of Medicine, we believe that equity, there it is, equity, diversity, and inclusion are core elements of institutional excellence, the university's website states. We are committed to developing and implementing a culture of inclusion in which faculty, staff, and by the way, inclusion means exclusion. Again, it's the reverse. They mean we are going to exclude people who don't agree with our cult. No diversity of opinion. Implementing a culture of inclusion in which faculty, staff, and students from underrepresented backgrounds experience a genuine sense of value, empowerment, and belonging. Belonging is another one of their somewhat newer cult words. Fox News Digital contacted Duke's medical school for comment and did not immediately receive a response. Some advocates for DEI and racial equity have embraced notions that professionalism is racially biased. They're trying to destroy professionalism and meritocracy and being on time and the nuclear family. And how do they do it? They say it's all white. According to an article published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, quote, timeliness, being on time, is a product of capitalism, and professionalism centers productivity over people, values, time commitments, accomplishes tasks in a linear fashion, and often favors individuals who are white and Western. You might find it interesting that they are attacking capitalism here. At the beginning, I talked about it being Marxist. I think I also talked about it being communist. It is all of it. All of the race Marxism, the identitarian Marxism, this new kind of Marxism, all of it is directly tied back to Marxism and communism. And that's one of the clues. The people who push this stuff, they pretend like they don't know. A lot of them actually don't know. They haven't read the theory. They don't even know where their ideas, like where their opinions come from. But then there's these little clues once in a while where they say it out loud. And they're attacking capitalism. An article from the UCLA Law Review published in 2023 calls professionalism, quote, a racial construct, end quote. It is that the standard itself is based on a set of beliefs grounded in racial subordination and white supremacy. Through this analysis, professionalism is revealed to be a racial construct, the article says. And now they're mentioning this thing that I mentioned a second ago that I want to show you, this graphic that was put out by the National Museum for African American History and Culture, which is a part of the Smithsonian Museum. They put this out in 2020. And it was a graphic that explained how whiteness was linked to, quote, delayed gratification, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, and decision making. Oh, this is so racist towards Black people, towards Mexican people, and Asians, and anyone who's not white. It's so racist. It's basically saying you're not capable of objective thought or rational, linear thinking, or understanding cause and effect relationships, or you're not capable of decision making. It's so gross. And you know who loves this document? The white supremacists, because they agree with it. Ooh, the light got very bright for a second. Let me turn that down. The dean of Duke says that quote, all of this, it reflected the goals, priorities, and strategies of the Duke University School of Medicine. Insane. This is insane. Let me show you this. This is from 2020. This is when the Smithsonian got in trouble for that graphic, where it was where I think some people on the left started to see what this really is, like I did. This was one of those moments where some people started to wake up because this was so gross and this is such like this is white supremacy, right? But it was woke social justice people putting it out. And so I think a lot of this was a what James Lindsay calls a woke breaking point moment, a waking up moment for a lot of people who were still in the cult I was in. Smithsonian Museum. This is an article from 2020. Smithsonian Museum apologizes for saying hard work, rational thought is white culture. They did this. They said this. They believed this. And by the way, they didn't apologize for believing it. They just apologized for people noticing and getting upset. They apologized for people getting upset, but they still believe this. As you can see in the Duke article we just read, they're still pushing this crap that being on time is a white thing and nobody else knows how to do it. So racist. A Smithsonian Museum apologized for a chart listing hard work and rational thought as traits of white people, white culture. The National Museum of African American History and Culture said in a statement Friday that it was wrong to include the graphic in an online portal about race and racism in America. They apologized for including it. This is in their section about whiteness, which still exists. Their whiteness section is just as bad. But in case you haven't seen this, it's been a while. Let me just show you this graphic. Again, I've shown it before. This is what they put out. This museum that's part of the Smithsonian. Aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. And they have an American flag there because that's awful. That's white, right? White dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power, there's the word, there's the nugget at the center of their belief system, power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. So this is they're presenting this as a bad thing. It's bad. It's bad. People of color. Anybody who's not white, if you believe in these things like the nuclear family or rugged individualism or the scientific method or a good work ethic, or if you believe in history, looking at history, like that's a bad thing. That's a white thing. They put this racism out in the world. They did. So all of this stuff they said was whiteness. Rugged individualism, the individual is the primary unit, self-reliance, independence and autonomy, highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment, you get what you deserve kind of attitude. Individualism, basically, they're saying that's white. Treating people as individuals based on the content of their character and not their skin, that's a white thing, they say. And that means it's bad. Family structure. They say all of this is white. The nuclear family, having a father, a mother, 2.3 children, being ideal, that all of that is white and bad. The husband being the breadwinner and head of the household, that's a white thing. That's bad, they say. The wife being a homemaker or being subordinate to the husband, that's a white thing, they say. Children having their own rooms and learning independence, that's a white thing, they say. Emphasis on the scientific method. Science is white. Wow. Wow. And under that section, they say objective, rational, linear thinking. That's a white thing. Therefore, they say it's bad. Cause and effect relationships is a white thing. Understanding cause and effect, that's a bad thing. Quantitative emphasis. So being able to look at data. Maybe that's why Duke Medical Center feels like they don't have to give any data or any scientific explanation for their insane claims that everybody has implicit bias and that racism is a public health crisis. It continues, history. They say history is based on North European immigrants' experience in the United States and that it's got a heavy focus on the British Empire, the primacy of Western Greek and Roman and Judeo-Christian tradition. That's what our country was founded on, okay? I mean, there's a reason why that's what you learn. There's a reason why when you're in Japan, you learn Japanese history. Or if you're in Tanzania, where I spent my last year at Duke, or half of my year, I spent there, and you're going to learn about the history of Tanzania. I mean, that's geographical privilege, if you want to use the word privilege. They say a work ethic, a Protestant work ethic, is a white thing. They say hard work being the key to success. Oh, nah. Hard work, forget that. That's a white thing. It's bad. It's bad. They say work before play. That's a white thing. It's bad. They say if you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. That's a white way of thinking. Bad. And this is the second half of that document. So this is the end. Religion, they say Christianity being the norm, that's a white thing. That came from whiteness. It's bad. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition being foreign, that's a bad thing. That's a white thing. Well, it has been foreign until recently. I mean, now the predominant religion and the religion that's the norm is their religion, is this bullshit, is this racist shit, this woke shit. That's the number one religion in America right now. They say status, power, and authority. Respecting authority, that's a white value. A heavy value on ownership of goods, space, and property. That's really insidious and sick. They say that's a white thing. They say that that's bad. That's sick. You know why? Property is freedom. Being able to keep the fruits of your labor and without having the government take it from you forcibly. Like, that's freedom. They are at their heart, they are communists, they are Marxists, they hate private property. They don't want you and I to be able, or black people, or any people. They don't want anyone to be able to own property. They don't want you to own your own vehicle or your own home, or God forbid, grow your own food. They want you dependent on the government. This is why they push, the WF pushes these 2030 initiative things where they say in the year 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That's actually what their propaganda says. And they have pictures of happy people saying you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They are working towards removing our very right to be able to own property, because property is freedom. It's freedom from them. So you don't have to be a slave to them. And they want us to be slaves. So they put that in here. They propagandize to, this was at the African American Museum. They're pushing propaganda on black people, telling them that property is bad. It's a white thing. You don't want to own it. You don't want to try to own your own things. You don't want to try to get out of debt. It's so evil. Here's the time thing. They say time, following a rigid time schedule and being on time, that's all whiteness. Nobody else can do it. You can't do that if you're black. You can't be on time. Racist. It's racist. It's so gross. They teach little kids this. They teach them this racism. White kids and black kids. They teach them that white kids can be on time and black kids can't. Future orientation. They say planning for the future is a white thing. Delaying gratification. They say that's a white thing. These are all bad things. Having the attitude that tomorrow will be better, like having a positive outlook on the future, that's a bad thing. That's white. That's what they say. I guess that goes hand in hand with telling black children that they shouldn't try to own property or plan for the future. It's all bad. It's all white. They say our aesthetics, beauty. They say it's based on European culture. They have this dig in there about steak and potatoes and bland is best. They say they have this little dig, the white people food, I guess. It's kind of funny. It's funny they put that one in there. Bland's not best, by the way. I do love steak and potatoes, but I like really spicy food as well. And they say woman's beauty is based on blonde and thin and Barbie, and that this is a white thing and a Western thing. Man's attractiveness being based on economic status, power, and intellect, that's a white thing. Though that's an evolutionary thing. I mean, that's biology. Holidays, they are upset that we have Christian religious holidays. Well, that was the dominant religion until recently. So it would make sense that those would be the dominant holidays. If you go to a Muslim country, your dominant holidays are going to be Muslim. If you're what used to be a Christian country, your dominant holidays are going to be Christian. Of course. Now they're woke. Now our biggest holiday. Look at our biggest holidays. We just had a whole month of Pride. It's the woke cult religion holidays. They have a section on justice and saying, look at this. They single out property again. They really hate property rights. They say protecting people's property and entitlements is a white thing and it's bad. You shouldn't be allowed to own property, not according to these race Marxists and communists. Competition, competing, meritocracy, all of this here, action orientation, learning how to do something about a situation, decision making. They say all of this is white and it's bad. They really put this out there, the woke religious cult I used to be in. And the only reason they apologized and took it out of the museum was because people in their cult started to have their eyes open and were like, this is hella racist. What is this? It's really bad, right? When you have, and white supremacists online, like, yeah, clapping. Johnny, hello, Johnny says, may I introduce you to France? I still have to cover what's happening there. That's a bummer. Davina says, give me spice or give me death. I agree with you. I'm going to take a break from reading. It was a lot of reading. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to take a look at the chat for a second. And there's more about Duke. I don't know if I'll cover it all today. This is just some of it. This is the race stuff. But they've also been involved in the gender stuff and the child transitioning stuff. They hosted the WPATH president, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, Dr. Marcy Bowers. They hosted Marcy Bowers, and that was the infamous video conference that I've played before, where the president of WPATH said on camera, admitted on camera, that 100% of little boys that they give puberty blockers to, 100% in Tanner stage 2, around age 11, that they are never able to achieve orgasm in adulthood. She admitted, I say she, but Marcy Bowers is a biological man who has transitioned to try and present as a woman. I'm going to say he because I don't respect him. He admitted on camera that in 100% of those cases, they've chemically castrated those little boys. That was at Duke. Duke hosted that. Duke has a whole thing on the website about supporting teens in transition. That's children. That's what that means. That means sterilization and mutilation of kids. These are the fruits of the woke religious cult having thoroughly infected Duke University. Yeah, Jardum, they want everyone to be non-binary. Skillet for $10. Hey, Skillet. Thank you for the super chat. Says, question, I'm just tuning in, so I'm sorry if already answered, but did your commie studies classes put you through struggle sessions at Duke? Thanks for the great podcast. Well, thank you for the great question. Mostly, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is actually not the classes, although it did happen in the classes. But the biggest place where the struggle sessions happened for me I was part of the nonprofit, the organization Amnesty International. They have college chapters. They have chapters at universities all across America. And I worked for Amnesty International while I was at Duke. And so I would go to conferences where they would have like the student representatives from all these different universities would come. And I went to the very first one that I remember, the very first struggle session. It was called Dismantling Racism. It was hosted by Amnesty International, and it was in Florida. We traveled there for it. And that was when they first started the redefinition indoctrination, where they introduced the new definitions of words to me. And then we were supposed to confess our white privilege and our implicit bias and try and search our minds and our history for examples of it and confess it like a struggle session, confess our guilt and our sin, It was gross, but I was bought in. I remember I had some reservations at first, but I had a friend there with me who was in Amnesty International at Tulane, a different college. And I remember asking her like some of the questions I had about it. Well, I'm not sure if this part makes sense. And she just sort of helped to smooth over and allay my concerns. Later on, I became one of those people who would smooth it over and allay the concerns of new recruits. But she did that for me. The good cop. I was the good cop. I helped ease people into it. And that's what my friend did for me. One of the results of it, I've shared this story before, but when I got back to Duke pretty soon after this conference, that was when, I've told this story before. My friend and I were walking back to East Campus late at night from a Mexican restaurant, a bar, and we had been drinking, and we were walking back, and this guy we were on this deserted street near the campus. And at that time, it was pretty dangerous at night. Now it's even worse because there's a whole crack and meth epidemic there in Durham. But it was pretty dangerous then as well. And anyway, at the end of this deserted road, this large this large black guy started walking towards us, and he said, "I'm gonna F you up." He said the F word. "I'm gonna F you up." And we kept walking towards him. It was like in slow motion because I had been drinking, so I wasn't fully thinking logically, but I had just been through this indoctrination, this dismantling racism training. And so immediately the social justice woke sensor started kicking in, and it was like, because I wanted my gut instinct. They deprogram your gut instinct. They reprogram you. And so, some guy at the end of the street says, "I'm going to fuck you up." My instinct was for us to go a different direction, to turn and run. But immediately in my head, I was like, that's your inherent bias. You just went through this training where you had to learn implicit bias and racism. And you don't want to be racist, do you? You don't want to turn around. And what if he thinks it's because he's a black person that you're running away, and not because he said he's going to F you up? Not because it's late at night and you're a woman and there's this big guy at the end of the street saying he's going to F you up. What if he thinks it's because he's black? What if you're a racist? We kept walking towards him. Crazy. And you hear stories like this. There's stories like this in the news all the time. These people go into dangerous situations. A lot of times white people, they do crazy things. They put themselves in danger. And I think a lot of it's because of that programming from the woke cult. And anyway, this guy, we met in the middle of the street. He told us he had a gun. He told us he was going to kill us and shoot us if we didn't give him all of our money. I didn't have any money on me. I had an ATM card. He made us empty our pockets. He wanted any vehicles we had. I told him I had a bicycle on West Campus, which was pretty far away. And we were going to East, my friend and I, to catch a bus there. He wanted my bicycle, and he kept gesturing to his pants like as if he had a gun, and he was going to pull it out, right? And I trusted that he had one. I never saw it, but he kept gesturing, and he was clearly on drugs. He was clearly on crack or something. And so he said, we're going to walk to the ATM off of East Campus so you can get some money out. So we started walking there, and the things that he said to me, the ones that stand out, he kept threatening to kill us. He at one point said he liked the way I look, which was the first time I had considered that rape might be a possibility also. I did get a little snippy with him at one point because he kept berating us that we didn't have any money, and I told him I was sorry. I was like, "You should have picked someone better dressed," because there were a lot of rich people at Duke. I was like, "Why'd you pick us?" But we were there. But it was like, also that we didn't have a car. I was like, "Well, should have picked someone better dressed." I did kinda get a little snippy at one point, but I also was trying to explain to him that I had just been through a dismantling racism conference. This guy on crack who says he's gonna kill me. Oh, man. Anyway, he also asked me one of the craziest things he asked me, at one point, he stopped us under this tree, and because he was rambling, like I said, he was on drugs. He's asked me, "If you die tonight, do you think you'll go to heaven or hell?" And I don't even know how to explain that moment. It was like frozen in time, and I didn't know, and I told him I didn't know, because that's when I was leaving God. I had been leaving God and falling into this new woke cult, and that terrified me. And then we continued walking towards the ATM. We were on the main road now that runs by East Campus, and there's like campus patrols and cop cars out a lot because that's, like I said, it's pretty dangerous out there. And so a cop drove by, and as the cop was approaching us, he told both of us, if you run or if you yell or anything, I'll kill you. And we got to the light, and we were waiting for the light to change so we could keep walking, and my friend just, like, turned to me, and it was slow motion. My friend just looked at me and then took off running towards the cop car, and I was, like, figuring out what I was gonna do, like, slow motion, like, looking at the guy, he looked at me, and then I took off running the other way, um, and then all these cops and campus police got called in. They ended up surrounding the guy. They got him on the ground. They handcuffed him. They pulled his sweatpants down. He did not have a gun the whole time. Then the cops, it wasn't a great experience because they berated us. One of them, I remember, he was like, "Why do you college kids give these people money?" And he didn't even have a gun. And it was like, I thought he was going to kill me. And yeah, there's more to the story. I've told it all before. But Davina's jokes, I'm sure he was receptive to racial harmony. No, weirdly, Davina, even though I told him I was an ally, it didn't help. The last part, I'll just say it since I've told so much of it already. The last part that was annoying was that the cop was taking my report right next to this guy who's on the ground, and he asked me my name and my address, like where I lived and on campus, and I was hesitant to give that to him because that guy was laying right there, and I looked at the guy and I looked at the cop, and the cop's like, "He's not listening," or "He doesn't matter, don't pay attention to him." And so I felt like I so I told him my name and address, and then the guy laying there on the ground listening is like, "Now I know." That's what he said, "Now I know." So then I lived in fear for a long time after that. At night, I was a little jumpy. I remember I was walking to my dorm one night and a friend yelled out, "Smith!" Like, they used to call me Smith. He's like, "Smith!" And, just took off running. It was this immediate, I didn't even think about it. My body just ran, and then I stopped. I realized it was my friend. I stopped, but I was a little jumpy for a while that this guy might try and find me. He didn't. Um, yeah. So, oh, hey, Duke Devil 95's here. Duke Devil 95 says, "I've said it before, Keri and I had very different Duke experiences. I was in the college Republicans and a writer for the Duke Review. I was the guy who college Keri would have protested. Dude, yes, we've joked about this before. So I was there 96 to 2000. I think you were there right before me. And absolutely, I was in, dude, I lived in the women's studies dorm. Okay, if that it wasn't enough for me to minor in it. I had to live in the dorm. We had a dorm. I was the I was just such a woke initiate, you know, and I was always out there tabling for Amnesty International and other social justice organizations, like yelling at people trying to get. I was the prototype for the SJW, and yeah, man, I fell in hard with the cult. Owen says the cop had probably been through that situation with students 100 times. Yeah, probably. I don't have as much, back then I was really pissed at the cop, but I don't have as much scorn for him anymore. I get it. I just wish he hadn't asked my name next to that dude. Women's Studies dorm, says Therese. Hey, Therese. Women's Studies dorm, patchouli and unshaved pits. Pretty much. Yes. And tarot cards. We used to read tarot, patchouli. Okay. I'm probably gonna wrap this up. I told you about the WPATH video. I've played it before. I just wanted to do a succinct kind of piece about this latest Duke thing I saw today that made me so upset. If you get a chance, as I said, please sign the petition. Kenny Xu does great work. His organization, Colorado United, does great work. They have a DEI tip line. I've got the links in the chat. I will edit the description and put them below. Go sign it. This is, I mean, there's a lot of these stories. We know this at every college, every corporation, every school nowadays. There's this woke crap happening. This one happens to be personal to me because I went there and I'm so ashamed of them. And because I have family that goes to the Duke University Hospital. And so it's a personal ask. Give it to Duke. Give it to them. Read them their rights. Please sign the petition. Thank you. We're done. Oh, let me see. Duke Devil in the chat. Duke Devil 95. We had former AG Ed Meese come to campus my senior year. We were told there was going to be a huge protest. It was 10 people. Very disappointing. Oh, man. Well, the protests got bigger. They did. Keto and Crime. Hey, Tracy. For $5. Thanks for the super chat. Tracy says leftists project their own hate, misery, and dissatisfaction with their own lives. Moderates, liberals, and conservatives are happier. Studies show. That's true. I've read these happiness studies. Also, married people are happier. I mean, that's one benefit of marriage if you take it seriously. And Tracy, I mentioned at the beginning, but Tracy at Keto and Crime and we recorded a video together talking about Project 2025. I'm not sure when it's going to come out on her channel. I think maybe this weekend. And then I'll put it out on this channel eventually also. But first, I want to just send people over there to see it. So I'll let you guys know when that's up. And she's also got a video that's out already that's about just what is in Project 2025, sort of a summary if you want to go and check it out at Keto and Crime. Good to see you, Tracy. Thank you. Okay, guys. Yeah, Kevin's like, bye, wrong thinker. See you guys next time. See you guys. I could sit here and hang out for a while, but I'll let you go. I'm in a talkative mood now. I'm like, I should stay, but no. I have things I have to do. I have to get ready for this trip, and yeah. And Friday Night Tights is about to happen, and also, as I mentioned in the beginning, Mike Harlow's interviewing Sherry Curry tonight, and I want to see that. So. You guys, and Tracy from Keto and Crime says the video is about to drop on her channel in a few minutes. So go and subscribe. You can find her right there in the chat. Have a good weekend, guys. I'll see you later. Remember, book club is Thursday, July 18th. Hit me up at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com if you want to be in that discussion. It's the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Okay, take care.